Yesterday morning, Secretary of Defense, or Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, announced 10 new policy directives focused on raising physical fitness standards, enforcing merit-based promotions, reforming military equal opportunity procedures, and reducing non-combat mandatory training requirements. He also had harsh criticisms of the woke or politically correct leadership. Retired Rear Admiral Mike Smith is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He was awarded the Bronze Star for his action during combat. He joins us on MetroNews Talkline this morning. Admiral, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
What did you make of Secretary Hegseth's comments yesterday as he addressed hundreds of generals and flag officers?
It was just a waste of time and such a missed opportunity. Everything he talked about was his political grievances, and when he could have been talking about what are the threats our country faces and how he wants these commanders to approach those threats. So it was really unfortunate.
Do we lack a warrior ethos, quote unquote, within the ranks of the military? Are we not focused enough on war to achieve peace through strength?
Who doesn't want increased warrior mentality or a greater lethal force? Every single officer in that auditorium was a commander. Every minute of the day they think about, how do I instill more warrior ethos in my people? They're the ones that are going to be responsible if suddenly some major war breaks out, because everybody will say, well, we always told you to be prepared. So they think about that every day. They don't need the secretary to tell them, you guys need to instill warrior ethos. They know that's their responsibility.
Retired Rear Admiral Mike Smith joining us on Metro News Talkline. He hit on physical fitness standards. I guess we're not going to have any more fat officers, by the way. I heard that during the speech. What's your take on the physical fitness standards? Should there be one standard across the board? Is there? And we're solving a problem that doesn't exist? What's your take?
When you take a look at the instruction he came out with, he's dividing it into those that are in combat arms and those that are not, and saying that if you're in combat arms, you have to meet the male standards. As I understand it, first of all, there's no, I'm in the Navy, there are no females in the SEALs. And in special ops in the Army and the other services, they have to meet that standard. So you're really fighting an issue that doesn't exist, and you're sending a huge negative message to women and minorities about the welcome they have at the senior ranks of our military.
So I looked at some of the B-roll from the meeting. Granted, it was limited. There were still shots as well. I didn't see anyone unkept. I didn't see any, unkept facial hair. I didn't see anyone that was fat. Let's just say it. Everybody looked trim and in shape. Who was he talking to?
He entered that auditorium with a list of grievances that he has clearly articulated since before he wrote his book. So that's part of why I think it was such a wasted opportunity. There wasn't a person in that auditorium that didn't already understand the secretary's view on this list of political grievances. He didn't need to spend millions of dollars to fly everybody in at the last minute to articulate those. So those folks in that auditorium, even though they're in their 40s and 50s and some probably in their 60s, they still have to themselves do a physical fitness test, and pass it to continue serving in the military.
You can't get into his mind, but where do the lists of grievances come from? Because if I'm hearing you, you're saying, look, these things are not real problems. So where do the grievances come from?
I too can't get in his mind either. He served in the military. He had his own perspective. I would opine that perspective is very much that of a mid-grade officer in the special ops or in the infantry, as a National Guardsman, but that doesn't necessarily equate to the Space Force or the Navy, let alone his view of, okay, when we take a look at what the military does, we're just going to focus on the military aspect. it reflects a real lack of understanding of how complex it's going to be if we really had a global war with China. And that's what many of those commanders are responsible for being able to respond to. So he has this very narrow view of the military when those commanders understand that the depth of their responsibilities are so much vaster.
Admiral, I'm going to be honest. I'm hesitant to even ask this question because I don't want to plant a seed. But all that brass in one room in the world we live in today, I would think that's a security risk, bringing that kind of collective intelligence together in a single room for a single target.
Well, I think that luckily right now, probably the intel assessment is such that, holding that event in the middle of a Marine Corps base in Quantico, you really minimized that specific type of threat. But they were all traveling. It was advertised that they were all traveling. Many have to travel on commercial airlines. So if there was somebody who wanted to do damage, that it certainly was advertising that. But at the end of the day, I don't think that was really as great a risk as some people think.
Well, good.
I want to go back to something you mentioned there, that the comments may be, I can't remember how you phrased it exactly, discouraging to people of color, women in the military. Am I framing that correctly? I don't want to misrepresent what you said.
Yeah, I think that his statement that we are not, in essence, that our military is not stronger because it reflects our society, that concept should be struck from the thought process of those leaders. That's just unconscionable. I mean, you can have women and minorities in the leadership positions and still have a warrior ethos and still have a lethal force. Those people, many who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and other operations, have examples from their career where, thank goodness, they had a reflection of society, especially if in positions where they were leading their enlisted men. We've learned so much about the importance of bringing in women and minorities to serve in leadership positions. They talked a lot about the greatest generation and how wonderful World War II was, and it was, but it was a segregated military, and you had white officers running minority units. We don't need to do that anymore. We're just a reflection of society. And I just think that the signal he is sending is, if you're a woman, you're a minority, don't join the military. Don't expect to be promoted. Don't expect to lead troops. That's not your role. You'll be in a support role.
But if the standard is the same for everybody, could that be encouraging though? Like, hey, we don't care if you're purple with pink polka dots. You come in here, you do what you do, and you do it well. You're going to rise up through the ranks no matter who you are. I mean, could that be encouraging?
Absolutely. And if that's all he had said, that's great, because that's what we're promoting right now. But he specifically said that the day of believing that we're stronger because we reflect society is over. That's where I think he went too far. Again, his going in is great. We want a more lethal force. We want warriors to have the same standards. If you're in a job that's physically demanding, you have to be able to meet a standard. Everyone. There's men that don't meet that standard, and there'll be women that don't meet that standard.
President suggested yesterday during his portion of the speech using dangerous cities as military training grounds. I'd like your reflection on that comment.
I think there wasn't an officer in that auditorium that didn't cringe when they heard that. We train our forces so that they are ready for combat. They are ready for their mission. But we don't send recruits. We didn't send recruits to Afghanistan and train them in Afghanistan to be able to be prepared. So if we're going to use our cities as training grounds, there are going to be casualties. People are going to make a mistake. We want people to make a mistake when they're training, so they won't in real life. That's such a dangerous concept. And all of those officers understand the public opinion of the military in Vietnam. And that is driving the American people to have that experience. If you start militarizing our cities and where uniformed people are commonly patrolling our streets and being trained on what is right and wrong and making mistakes, we're going to go back to a time when the people, the public opinion of the military was so negative. We can't afford that. We spent too much time and effort and blood and sweat and tears and money to get where we are today. Let's not go backwards.
Retired Rear Admiral Mike Smith, U.S. Naval Academy graduate, Bronze Star recipient. Thank you for the perspective this morning. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. Have a great day.
Absolutely.